We welcome all of you. Thank you very much for coming to our member breakfast. I'd like to start just by thanking Greg Cody for hosting this once again here at Modern English. We really appreciate it. Greg, thank you. I think all of us are looking at the elections finally. Probably many of us avoided it for a while, and we have many questions as to what it's going to look like. On the Republican side, it will be a slugfest. Will it be long-term? Will it be a battle until, say, May or June? On the Democratic side, what does the message look like when you're in a down economy and you're trying to, from your perspective, move ahead in terms of supporting those folks who are out of work, make sure the middle class is sustained across time? How do you message that during a campaign? So what we have done today is we've invited a couple of the nation's experts on messaging in politics, and we're really pleased to have them. We have this morning with us Steve Grand, and we have Linda Moore Forbes. I'd say that Steve is a key advisor to Karl Rove's American Crossroads Group and will play a major role in the presidential congressional races this coming election. Linda is a veteran of Democratic presidential campaigns since 1988 and served in the Clinton White House and also on Hillary Clinton's 2008 campaign. What we've asked them to do is share their expertise. We'd like to know something more about independent expenditures. We'd like to know what's the role that will play. How do PACs play into this campaign? How will it be different from past campaigns? What's their interaction with campaigns? How will they think about pivoting or changing across time to support or not to support campaigns? How will they shape our perceptions, essentially? In some ways, this is sort of a prehistory. You don't get to see history before it's rolled out before you many times, but I think you'll see here how that message is being crafted, how they're thinking about crafting, and of course they're going to share their playbooks with all of us and with each other, I'm sure, this morning. I'm not going to do their rich and long bios justice this morning because it's really long. I would be here till 9 o'clock reading them. Let me introduce Steve quickly. And then I'll introduce Linda. What they're going to do is speak for about 10 to 15 minutes, a presentation of their perspectives, maybe run a couple of ads, show you what they've been looking at recently, and then we're going to open it to questions and answers. Steve Grand is co-founder and president of Wilson Grand Communications, a political and corporate media research and strategic consulting firm with office in D.C. and also in the Bay Area. They've been around since 1985. Steve is one of only a few consultants in the industry who has both a strong background in research and a proven expertise in media production strategy and planning. He's a veteran of 4 U.S. presidential campaigns, numerous gubernatorial campaigns, including here in Massachusetts, the National Republican Senatorial Committee, the Congressional Committee, the RNC, and Karl Rove's group, American Crossroads. In 2010, Grant served as one of the main media vendors for American Crossroads, writing and producing their media in both the Nevada and the Kentucky U.S. Senate races. Again, I could go on and on. The same is going to be true with Linda. She is a veteran of the White House, Capitol Hill, and national political campaigns. She started out after working on a Senate and presidential campaign, the Dick Gephardt campaign of 1988. Linda joined the staff of the Democratic Leadership Council, serving for 5 years as its field director. For 8 years, she served in the Clinton White House Office of Political Affairs, first as special assistant to the president, and in the second term as deputy assistant to the president and deputy political director. Taking a leave in the fall of 1996, she served as deputy political director for Clinton-Gore 96. Among her responsibilities was winning the Midwest battleground states, and there she was a smashing success. All 7 must-win states were won, 5 by double-digit margins. And this strategy also produced down-ballot victories in terms of 2 gubernatorial and 5 U.S. Senate contests, and they recaptured 7 congressional seats. Following the White House, Linda served for a decade as senior advisor to Evan Bayh, someone that we all know well, and helping to establish his profile as a national leader and as a centrist Democrat. Linda took 2 leaves of absence during her tenure working with Senator Bayh to work on presidential campaigns. In 2004, she served as the political director for vice presidential nominee John Edwards as part of the Kerry Edwards team. And in 2008, she served on Hillary Clinton's campaign as director of congressional affairs and was a member of the campaign's strategic decision-making team. Again, you can see these folks have a lot of experience across the country, and we're really pleased to have them this morning to shed a little light. Steve, do you want to come up first?
I think Linda's
going to go first.
I'm going to fix one technical thing that you so no one's distracted. Ladies and gentlemen, Linda Moore Forbes.
Thank you. It's good to be here today. And I will tell you up front, I will say a few things probably about Karl Rove and Crossroads GPS that aren't entirely positive, but Steve and I are very good friends, and we've done a lot of presentations together at the IOP. So anything I say about Crossroads or Karl Rove is not meant to be pejorative towards Steve. He's a wonderful person, a very good friend, and does amazing work.
And he's heard it before.
Just once or twice.
Nothing gets Democrats riled up more than the words Karl Rove. But I think even he is not raising as much money off of his name as he used to. He probably needs to do a few things to sort of vilify himself a little bit more. But it's funny because when I was looking at a couple of the spots that I want to show today, they are Crossroads GPS ads. So I sent Steve a note. I said, yikes. These are the best ads, the ones I want to show tomorrow. He's like, I didn't work on those. I didn't do those. It's okay. So Steve's going to cue this up for me in a minute. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about how things have changed. You guys know this, but I'll lay it out in terms of my career, in terms of the money and the organizations. During the Clinton years, all the soft money flowed into the DNC. And to the RNC. It was very transparent. You knew who all those donors were, and you knew what that money was used for. It was to put up all the negative ads and do all the work that the primary committee, the Clinton-Gore committee, didn't want to do. So the most fundamental thing that even in the days when tons of money was flowing into RNC and the DNC, that pot of money gives you the chance to really be positive in your own message that's got your stamp on it, your candidate's face on it, your candidate's voice on it, and really do those really tough, torch the opposition ads. It's even better now because you've even got one step removed. It doesn't have to say Democratic or Republican or any of that stuff. It says Crossroads or Crossroads GPS or Americans for Prosperity or whatever it is you want to say. The other thing that I've seen that's very, very different about this is that the Democratic Leadership Council was and still is a 501c4. 501c4s now look very, very different. They are not reported. That was a big problem that we had even back then of people saying, oh, this money should definitely be reported. The DLC, though, and C4 groups back then, we very much towed the line. We did not have a PAC associated with our entity. We did not do any advocating, other than issues, and it definitely wasn't anything related to elections. And you could argue we did tons of work that was promoting the eventual candidacy of Bill Clinton. And when Bill Clinton ran, we supported him as our former chair and as a person who was touting all the issues that we cared about that we helped him develop. But 501c4s now, which Steve does a lot of work for, very, very different. They have PACs attached to them. They very much advocate, although I think Steve could make the argument otherwise, from some people's perspective, they very much advocate the election or defeat of certain candidates. They do try to stay on the one issue at a time kind of approach, which makes them less vulnerable to examination by the FEC. But I do think that one of the things that we should talk about today is the non-reporting of 501c4s and how no one knows where that money's coming from. There are some press reports that you see about where it's coming from. Crossroads, for example, gets a ton of money from literally 4 people, a huge chunk of their money. But so much money is flowing into just Crossroads, just to name one organization. More money is flowing into the non-disclosed side than the disclosed side, a 2/3 to 1/3 ratio. And I think that the FEC is going to open up C4s after this cycle, and I don't know if we will see them used again, because I think that they'll prove to be so effective and used so much outside the bounds of what they were originally intended to do that that we probably won't be seeing those again. But you probably also saw right away, Romney was the first presidential candidate to super PAC up. I mean, he was right out of the gate, he had about over 20 million. And one thing that I think you all should think about and look at, and something that we'll be happy to talk about today, is the fact that the people running the super PACs, in particular Romney and Perry, they're just the 2 best examples, the people running their super PACs, the supposed entities that are not coordinating with their campaign at all, they're 2 of the closest, most long-time advisors to those 2 people. So to, really consider, oh, these people are not coordinating with the campaign at all is a huge stretch. And also, even if you look at the buys, like how the buys flow from, the ad buys flow from the campaign versus when the super PAC goes up and the messages, how they're rolling across media markets, it kind of stretches credulity to think that they're not coordinating. But I'm sure they'll get a chance to answer all that when they get scrutinized. The two ads that I wanted to show that give you a good sense of how IEs are used, how super PACs are used, are Crossroads ads in the Elizabeth Warren race. They've gotten tons of press here. I'm sure you've seen them. But we'll talk about those and talk a little bit about how it can change your strategy, get your strategy off. Crossroads has done something really interesting in that they've decided to go after Elizabeth Warren for being too close to Occupy, but then soon after they're accusing her of being too close to the banks. So all I can think here is maybe they're trying to sort of make her look like Mitt Romney. She's sort of all things and everywhere, so no one knows really what to make of her. But you can see Elizabeth Warren's fighting back and punching hard. But it is taking time off the proactive campaign schedule that I'm sure she had and the proactive agenda and message that she was going to get out to answer those kind of ads and to try to respond on the web, in interviews, and with ads to defend herself against these attacks. So can we look at Foundation first?
$14 million Americans out of work. But instead of focusing on jobs, Elizabeth Warren sides with extreme left protests. At Occupy Wall Street, protesters attack police, do drugs, and trash public parks. They support radical redistribution of wealth and violence. But Warren boasts, I created much of the intellectual foundation for what they do. I support what they do. Intellectual foundation for what? We need jobs, not intellectual theories and radical protests.
Thanks, Tom.
I mean, who was just clapping? I want to make sure I speak to you.
I didn't even have to look.
The first thing I'm going to promise is that I'm going to be a voice in the room on behalf of middle-class families.
Really? Congress had Warren oversee how your tax dollars were spent, bailing out the same banks that helped cause the financial meltdown, bailouts that helped pay big bonuses to bank executives while middle-class Americans lost out. Later, Warren went on a charm offensive with some of the same banks who got bailed out. Tell Professor Warren, we need jobs, not more bailouts and bigger government.
Okay, so clearly two examples of them trying to hit her at both ends of the spectrum. You're too close to banks, you're too close to Occupy Wall Street. This last ad, you guys have seen all the press, I'm sure, that she came out and said this is factually wrong, this is morally wrong. So we can talk a little bit more about that. But the main thing is that, this is something that Scott Brown, in my opinion, would never want to be associated with. If I were running his campaign, I would never run these kinds of ads because they're so tough and they are getting so much criticism for being completely factually wrong, morally wrong. But that's a whole other thing we can discuss. One of the things I think is going to come up in this next cycle too is that everyone talks about it being $1 billion campaign. Some people believe it could go up to $3 billion with outside groups and the campaigns. And I personally believe that Barack Obama is going to be outspent because, I mean, Citizens United basically said, okay, all corporations that the Obama campaign pissed off at some point, which are plenty, have at it, go for it. So the amount of money flowing into Americans for Prosperity and Crossroads and a lot of other groups is just amazing and mind-boggling. I think at some point too, with the state of the economy, the state of the unemployment rate in the country, we're going to see lots of stories about, really, this is how we're spending $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion. So I anticipate that coming probably next summer, if not sooner. So those are just some of the things that I hope we'll talk about today. Steve is going to have a great presentation. He does all kinds of IE work, so his knowledge of this is very, very in-depth. I think where you'll get the best out of us is when you get the two of us playing off of each other and doing your questions and answering the sort of Repub side and the Dem side. So without further ado, Steve, take it away.
So are we on the record or are we off the record here? Are we on the record? I see a video camera.
There's a video
rolling.
camera, so I usually think that's on the record.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here.
If you'd like, we can turn it off after.
Okay. Well, so I want to hit on a couple of things. I want to talk about how we started at Crossroads, because I think that's somewhat instructive to think about how this process has evolved. First of all, I want to be very clear. I'm not a lawyer. I've spent most of my life trying to not go to law school or med school, so I'm not a lawyer. I'm sure there are people here who are much more knowledgeable about the law, but I listen to the lawyers a lot, and I try to understand what it is that they're saying. In 08, just a little history on Crossroads, because I think it's given a sense of where the whole IE world has gone. In 2008, the team that really evolved into Crossroads tried to do a big IE. They had delusions of grandeur. They ended up raising $3 million. That was considered a massive failure in 08.
What's an IE?
Independent Expenditure Committee. All these groups are what we call the Independent Expenditure Committees. They are, maybe I should go to 30,000 feet first. So the Independent Expenditure Committees are separate from the campaigns. By law, they are not allowed to interact with the campaigns. Or specifically, I think the word is coordinate. So I might know somebody on the other side or on the campaign who I can have lunch with, but I can't say, here's the message we're thinking about going out with, what are you guys doing, when is your ad buy going on, what states are you going to be in. That's the coordination that's illegal. And as I understand it, it's pretty seriously illegal, and even though we're on the record, I would have said this if we were off the record, at least the people I work with do not screw around with this. These are people who see 14-year jail sentences and say, you know what, I'm not going there. And I mean, all you can do, I know it's just my word, but I'm telling you, I've never had anybody try to coordinate with me when we were on the two different sides here. That's the key of law, and it's why the fundraising rules then are different. In exchange for no coordination, the IEs, American Crossroads and others, can raise money, and they can raise it two different ways. American Crossroads is really two organizations. It's American Crossroads, which is that money is disclosable. It's unlimited, but it's disclosable, and those ads can actually advocate the vote. And then Crossroads GPS, Grassroots Policy Strategies. Crossroads GPS, which those ads are this 501c3 or 50C4, sorry, that basically is undisclosed. You can write $1 million corporate check, hand it to Karl Rove, and say, go get him. And no one will ever know you wrote the check if you don't want them to know. And it's not public. Those ads are more restricted in that they have to be single issue and they can't advocate the vote. So they advocate something else. Stop the reckless spending. Get Washington. It's something issue oriented and a specific ask that is not related to actually advocating the vote. So that's the organization, and again, the key is there's no coordination. Now, all the other IEs can coordinate. So American Crossroads can coordinate with Americans for a Better Government, can coordinate with the People's Front of Judea. You can have any number of these IEs. It's perfectly legal for them to all work together, and the guys at Crossroads have figured this out and have done a great job in doing that coordination, as long as they don't interact with the other side. Now, the other thing is, you cannot directly coordinate, but you can look at the internet. You can go to the campaign website. You can watch television and see what their ads are. So that's part of what we do. We look at what their messaging is. There's also a public file in every television station in the country that allows us to see what the upcoming media buys are. So we can go see where the campaign's going to be on the air and when, and we can plan accordingly. And then finally, we can do our own research. One of the things people say about these IEs is, oh, these are horrible because the campaign has lost their voice. The campaign is no longer telling the story. The campaign is now secondary to these big moneyed interests, and they may not be speaking for the campaign. Well, that can be true. You can have some group that is way off in the netherworld, and maybe they're off message. But as somebody who's for 30 years worked in the campaigns as well, there's a process you go through where you do the research, you figure out the messaging, and you implement. And it's the same people who have been doing that for 30 years within a campaign that are now doing it for these independent expenditure committees, for the most part, for the big ones. So that was a tangent. But just to get back to the short, recent history. So Crossroads comes up in 2010, and they said, we can't, last time we failed, we got to do better this time. So in June of 2010, they brought me on as the first media vendor, and we went, and they said the marquee race for us is going to be Harry Reid. That's going to be the place where we can raise national money. So Harry Reid, we started with ads in June, and basically the thing just caught fire. A lot of people didn't feel as good. I mean, they still gave money to the parties as well, but there was just a sense that with Rove and Ed Gillespie as big name people in politics in the Republican Party, there was a sense that these guys knew what they were doing. And then we made ads that people liked, and we started moving numbers. Even with a candidate on our side who was probably not the best candidate we could have had in Sharon Angle. But people started getting interested, and there was a snowball effect. And again, the goal was to raise $50 million last cycle. We did not. We raised $70 million. And we ended up going into races we didn't think we were going to go into. That was all for Senate races. And then, because it was going so well, we started doing congressional races as well. This time, and I think this has been stated publicly, so I think I'm okay saying it here, that I think the goal this cycle for Crossroads is 250. And I think they're going to get there. I think they're going to get there. So that's a quick history. I just want to show you a couple more spots just to give you a flavor, and you can kind of, I think then we'll open it up. But here's one that's on the air right now, and again, I think these ads, I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I actually, in part of trying to not become a lawyer, I got a PhD, and I studied metaphor and persuasion. And I think these ads are pretty simple. I think for the most part, you're not talking to the most sophisticated voters when you do TV ads. You're really not. That mushy middle that is willing to not be a hardcore Republican or not be a hardcore Democrat, for the most part, is a less sophisticated voter. And so it's a difficult messaging task to try to get anything through to them, much less some sort of complicated argument. And so oftentimes, what we try to do is just associate. All we want to do is take something that's already in their heads and associate it. So in that Elizabeth Warren ad, again, I didn't make that spot, but I think that's, okay, they realize people think this Occupy thing is bad. It's a negative thing. It's not good for the country. All we're going to try to do is associate Elizabeth Warren with the Occupy movement, and there you go. All that negativity people feel about the Occupy movement now transfers to Elizabeth Warren. Same with the banks. I mean, pick whichever one you want to associate her with, pick whichever one you like the least, and they make the association. So in a lot of these spots, you'll see us, and specifically in a lot of these states where Obama's numbers are not good, that's the tie we're going to make. So this is a spot. The other thing is, again, we're trying to set the agenda early. So we're literally on the air right now with presidential spots and 4 target races in Senate races. We're targeting 4 incumbents right now. Warren, Missouri, Claire McCaskill, Montana, Tester, and Nebraska. Nelson and Nebraska. So we're already up trying to just frame those races. Now, here's a spot. We're actually also in an Iowa congressional race. This is where they've gerrymandered they lost a seat. So a sitting D and a sitting R are now going to fight each other for this new district. And the Democrat is named Boswell. And so here's a little ditty that we've got on right now.
Leonard Boswell, Barack Obama, and Nancy Pelosi. 3 peas in a pod on health care. Their strong support of Obamacare means massive cuts to Medicare spending.
We took $500 billion out of Medicare in the Affordable Care Act.
They also want a board of unelected bureaucrats that could threaten seniors' access to care.
We took $500 billion out of Medicare.
And they're just getting started. Tell Congressman Boswell by sticking with Obama and Pelosi, you're sticking it to seniors.
So I could see that being called a positive ad, but just me. So again, you see the way, and I'll just show you one more because this one's kind of we do get to the point where it's, you know, everyone says part of the thing is, well, why they always run these negative ads? They don't even work. Why do they run the negative ads? Well, the reason we run the negative ads is that they do work. Again, with that mushy middle, that's how we move the numbers. I've been doing this for 30 years. We put the positive ads on, maybe we raise name ID, maybe we bump the numbers a little bit, but to get up, that slope goes like this on those last 4 or 5 points you need to win. And to push those people over, almost always the negative stuff works. Almost always. Because they're comparing. I mean, it is an election. And you're choosing between 2 entities, and so yes, you can talk about the positive attributes of one or the other, but you can also talk about the negative attributes to decide which one you're going to vote for. Now, once in a great while, again, and this was in the Reid race, it got so nasty, so negative, we had gone on the air in June and never stopped. And just pound, 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 pound. And so toward the end, even though people always say it, we usually don't believe it, toward the end, I finally decided they really are. We need to do something a little different because it was just so much cacophony out there with all these negative ads. You know how it is. You start watching and you'll see it in spades here in Massachusetts this year in the Senate race. I mean, you're going to get to this point where you're just like, oh, make them stop, make them stop. And so we got to there in Nevada. And so I did this spot that I've always wanted to do, and I finally had a place to do it. So this was kind of, it's going to feel like a negative ad, but then it does something very different, and we found this ad really caught people's attention because it was in the middle of just the, you know, not only this race being on the air killing each other, but 3 other races screaming and yelling, and so we tried this little idea.
Senator Harry Reid for 27 years. Wait a minute. Are you tired of all these negative political ads? Okay, how about just the facts? Nevada has the highest unemployment in the country, the highest foreclosure rate. Instead of fixing these problems, Harry Reid's made it worse, pushing Obamacare, more national debt, Wall Street bailout. Pretty simple. With that record, that's really all you need to know. Crossroads GPS is responsible for the content of this advertising.
So that's not quite as negative.
Is that an actor or a real person?
Both. He is what we call the announcer. And in fact, you know, they hear this voice from the depths for months. You know, no one ever sees these people. And so part of this too is to kind of pull back the curtain and say, oh, here's what's going on behind the scenes. Here's who this guy is. And you know, you get all this chatter about, oh, did you see that ad? So he is a paid narrator in this context. The other thing, I just wanted to make one more comment. I think we should throw it open for questions. But someone recently asked this morning, I think, you know, what does the campaign do when this stuff happens? I mean, campaign's got a plan, and then these idiots come in and start doing these negative ads. What the heck? Because literally, we're not allowed. I mean, if I'm on the campaign side and an IE goes up with an ad we don't like, I can't do anything about it. I mean, I can publicly say, I can have the candidate publicly say, this is a horrible ad, they shouldn't be doing it. But we can't make them stop. So obviously it is part of the context of a campaign. And we see what the IEs do. Now, hopefully the IEs do smart things. This is, to my knowledge, this hasn't been done yet, and I really want to do this sometime, but I've never found a place where anybody would let me. But I actually want to do an IE for the other side. And I'm going to make the worst, silliest Saturday Night Live spoof ad I could possibly make. That I think would, because, you know, John Q. Public doesn't read the disclaimer. You know, they don't look down here and say, oh yeah, that's a Crossroads GPS ad. Look at that. There's a, look at the bottom there. See, it's, look at that. Paid for by Crossroads Grassroots Policy. I mean, you know, that they don't, there's not as much publicly a sense of who's putting these ads out. Now, the other, just a little tidbit, it's interesting, for some reason the laws, because we're so far out right now, time-wise from the election, you get this little bitty disclaimer and no audio disclaimer. I think it's a 60-day window or a 30-day window to the election. We have to switch over. The disclaimer comes to here. It's all this gobbledygook here, and there has to be, the announcer has to say, paid for by Crossroads Grassroots Policy Strategies and not endorsed by any candidate, or something like that. So it does become a little more real when you get closer to the election. So there's a little more sense that this is a different entity doing this, but I still don't think people pay that much attention. And then I think, I just want to give you a feel, just so you can see it, and I don't want to go into it unless you have more questions, but I just thought the other place we do a lot of work is in the U.S. Senate. And so here's the Senate map, here's where the country is right now. And if I had to predict today, I would say that the Republicans are going to take the Senate. And again, I don't do this in a partisan way, I just think the data are showing that this is where the map is. So right now, these are kind of the sure seats, or what we're calling the sure seats. 42 to 45 that we think are solid, aren't going anywhere. So you've got all these brown ones that are all in play. So the Republicans need 5 to have 50. And again, unless anybody, in the questions, if somebody wants to hear about the races, we can go through them one by one, or if there's specific states you're interested in, we can talk about them. Obviously, right here, you know, Massachusetts is certainly one of the key ones. But I think the Republicans could easily lose Massachusetts and still take the Senate. I mean, this is almost a gimme. North Dakota's almost for sure win. Missouri's almost for sure. Well, Missouri, they don't have a great candidate. Nebraska, I think they're going to win. And then, so these two are almost definite. And then they just got to get 3 more out of all the rest of them. So.
Well, then I would add in, just to take a step back, Dems have 23 seats to defend, and Republicans only have 10. So just the landscape is just not good for Democrats.
Yeah,
which is
absolutely.
Why
Absolutely.
You know, the fact that it's even that close in a struggle is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. So I think at this point, unless you want to hear anything more formal, let's open it up. As you can see, Linda and I are very happy to sit very close to each other. We won't hit each other. So.
Okay. Is too much money a problem for the country? Too much money spent on campaigns?